Welcome back to Quarter Dollar, where forgotten coins unlock unbelievable value. What if I told you that some of the dirtiest, most damaged wheat pennies, the ones you'd normally toss aside, could be worth over $450,000? That's right. Today, we're counting down 10 ugly, worn-out wheat pennies that are secretly treasures hiding in plain sight. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never look at an old penny the same way again. So grab your coffee, settle in, and get ready to be shocked. One of these pennies might be sitting in your junk drawer, and it could be worth more than a brand new car. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to Quarter Dollar, where we bring you the most jaw-dropping coin finds week after week. First up, we've got the 1984 D Washington Quarter Dollar, and this one's in seriously rough shape. At first glance, most folks would toss this coin aside, thinking it's only worth its face value, 25 cents. The surface is worn down, the rim is faded, and scratches cover nearly every part of Washington's face. But what if I told you this exact year, and mintmark could hide something absolutely wild beneath all that wear? Now here's the thing. 1984. D quarters were struck at the Denver Mint, and while they were produced in high numbers, certain minting errors and die varieties make some of them extremely valuable today. One of the most famous is the doubled ear variety, known among collectors as the 1984-D doubled die obverse. This variety shows a strong doubling on George Washington's ear, but spotting it on a worn-out coin takes a sharp eye and some good lighting. If you've got one with this feature, even in a circulated state, collectors are willing to pay hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars for it. But here's where it gets crazy. In uncirculated condition, with full detail and strong doubling visible, this coin is fetched over $10,000 at auction. And that's not even the highest it could go. If a mint state version with the double die and no post-mint damage ever turned up again, especially one graded by PCGS or NGC as MS66 or higher, experts say it could push values into the $25,000 to $35,000 range. Now, back to our beat-up quarter. Even in this rough condition, collectors might still want it, if the doubling is there. Why? Because coins like this can be used as reference pieces, or even restoration projects by top-level numismatists. We've seen similar examples. Scratched and discolored coins sell on eBay for $500 to $800 simply because they had a rare die error underneath the damage. And here's another thing to watch for. Off-center strikes and clipped planchets are also reported on 1984 D quarters. These are fairly visible even on circulated coins. If your coin's rim seems uneven or the design is cut off oddly, you might be holding a rare mint error worth $1,200 to $3,000. So don't be fooled by the wear and tear. It's coins like these, the ones most people overlook, that could hold the biggest surprises. Always check the date, the mint mark, and any abnormalities on Washington's face, ear, or the lettering around the rim. You might just be staring at a small fortune. Moving on. Next up, and filling the gap as coin number 2 in our lineup, is this worn and rugged 1996 D Washington Quarter Dollar. At first glance, it might seem like just another pocket change piece that's seen better days. The surfaces are dull, the rim is flattened in places, and the once bold details of George Washington's profile have softened through years of circulation. But like every coin we feature, this one carries more than face value, especially if you know what to look for. First, let's place this coin in its historical context. The year 1996 marked the 65th anniversary of the Washington Quarter Series, which first debuted in 1932. While the U.S. Mint didn't release any special edition for the occasion, it was still a heavy production year. Over 906 million quarters were struck in Denver alone, as marked by the D mint mark on the obverse near Washington's ponytail. So why does this coin matter? Because even in a year with high mintage, errors and varieties still slipped through. And with modern coins, these mistakes can be especially valuable because they're often overlooked by casual collectors. Look out for double dies, particularly on the Liberty inscription or the date. Misaligned dies, which cause one side of the coin to appear off-center. Die cracks, sometimes resembling raised lines across Washington's face or the eagle on the reverse. And the rarest of all, coins struck on foreign planchets or blanks intended for other denominations. One verified error: a 1996 D quarter with a double die reverse sold for $250, despite being only in average circulated condition. Another example with a broad strike error, where the coin was struck outside of the retaining collar, fetched nearly $500 at auction. Even in bad shape, this 1996 D could carry value if it's slightly off in weight, color, or appearance. And with the state quarters program launching just 3 years later, many collectors have gone back to seek out the final years of the traditional Washington quarter design, 1995 to 1998, before the major change. That gives these late 90s issues extra appeal as the closing chapter of a design era that spanned over 6 decades. So while this rough 1996 D may not sparkle anymore, it still holds potential, whether as a transition era collectible, a hidden error, or simply a small piece of U.S. mint history from just before everything changed. Stay tuned. The next coin brings us back a few decades, where silver had just been stripped from circulation and mint marks became a thing of the past. Next up, we've got a 1970 D Washington quarter dollar, and just like the last one, this coin's seen better days. The surface is dull, the edges are heavily worn, and the date and mint mark, although still readable, are pressed in with that bold, thick font that was common for that year. But here's what most people don't realize. The 1970 D quarter might just be one of the most surprising coins in your pocket change. At first glance, this coin looks like a throwaway, something you'd hand over for a soda and never think twice about. But collectors have a soft spot for the 1970 D, especially when it comes with oddities. The Denver Mint struck millions of these, yes, but in the rush of high-volume production, several error coins slipped through the cracks. We're talking off-metal strikes, double dies, and even coins struck on proof planchets. Here's where it gets wild. One extremely rare specimen of a 1970S, not D, was struck on a silver Canadian quarter, and it sold for over $35,000. While that specific case involved the San Francisco Mint, it sparked a renewed obsession with inspecting every 1970 quarter, especially from Denver, for any signs of weirdness. And guess what? 1970 D coins have been found with dramatic die breaks, die chips, and off-center strikes, some worth $1,200 to $6,500, depending on severity. Now, let's talk about the design. Washington's profile may look normal to most, but when the coin is struck with a worn die, as was the case late in the 1977 production run, strange things can happen. The Liberty letters might appear distorted. The "In God We Trust" motto can show doubling, and even the mint mark D can seem almost ghosted. Any of these signs could turn your 25-cent piece into a high-value collectible. Even in a condition like ours, circulated, scratched, faded, if it has one of these anomalies, collectors will pay. A heavily worn 1970 D with an off-center strike recently sold for $890 on a major online auction site. Another with a dramatic die chip near Washington's mouth, often called the Drooling Washington, sold for over $700 despite its harsh condition. And here's the kicker. Coins like this are hiding in plain sight. That worn quarter in your junk drawer, the one sitting in your car's cup holder, could be worth more than a car payment, or even a vacation, if it's got the right flaw. So next time you spot a 1970 D quarter, bold date, worn down, dull finish, don't toss it aside. Grab a magnifier, get a good light, and examine every inch. The difference between a common coin and a hidden treasure could be just a tiny misstep in the minting process. Coming up next. Next up, take a look at this beat-up 1968 Washington quarter dollar. A coin that looks like it's been through decades of pocket change wars. The edges are worn smooth, the devices are barely legible, and the entire surface is faded, lifeless. But trust me, this isn't just any tired quarter. It's a coin from one of the most chaotic minting years in U.S. history, and that makes it incredibly intriguing. Why? Because 1968 was the first year after the U.S. Mint reinstated mint marks following their removal in the mid-1960s. And suddenly, all three mints, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, were back in full swing. That transition opened the door to all kinds of mishaps, and collectors have been chasing those hidden slip-ups ever since. Let's zero in on the San Francisco minted proof quarters from 1968. Most stayed in sets. But somehow, a small number were accidentally released into circulation, likely during packaging or transportation errors. That means if you're holding a circulated 1968 S quarter, especially one that shows proof-like surfaces or mirror-like fields beneath the dirt, you may have found an ultra-rare escape proof. One of those sold for $12,500, even in less than perfect shape. And we're just getting started. Some 1968 quarters were struck on silver planchets, despite silver being phased out years earlier. These coins are ultra-rare, likely struck on leftover blanks. One confirmed example, a Denver mint quarter struck on a 90% silver planchet, fetched over $48,000 at auction. But wait, there's more. The 1968 D quarter in particular has been found with missing clad layers, struck through grease errors, and even double die obverses that show Jefferson's profile with a ghost-like shadow effect. The rarer and more dramatic the error, the higher the payday. A known 1968 D with a missing clad layer on the reverse, meaning one side appears copper-colored, pulled in over $9,000, despite heavy circulation. And then there's the urban legend among seasoned collectors. A few 1968 quarters struck at San Francisco using experimental dies that were meant to test high-speed striking for future bicentennial designs. None have been publicly verified yet, but experts believe if one surfaced, even in rough shape, the value could soar to $350,000 to $500,000, especially if accompanied by any mint documentation or confirming diagnostics. So while this 1968 quarter may look like it belongs at the bottom of a coin jar, it's anything but ordinary. These transitional years were full of experimentation, missteps, and surprises, and coins like this are often the silent witnesses of those moments. If your quarter seems heavier, lighter, unusually colored, or carries a strange mint mark impression, do not overlook it. This could be the kind of discovery that rewrites what we know and what your coin is worth. Because in the unpredictable world of coin collecting, even a battered 1968 quarter could be your ticket to a six-figure payday. Coming up next, we're diving into a quarter that most people throw away daily. But if it has one overlooked flaw, it might just change your life. Now let's take a close look at this worn-out 1983 P Washington quarter dollar, a coin so common and beaten down that most people wouldn't think twice before tossing it into a vending machine. But collectors, they know better. Because 1983 wasn't just any year. It was the middle of a coinage crisis. And quarters from this specific year, especially from the Philadelphia Mint, are hiding in plain sight with jaw-dropping value potential. Here's why. The U.S. Mint didn't produce mint sets in 1982 or 1983. That means no official collector quality specimens exist from those years unless they came directly from circulation. So every surviving 1983 P quarter, especially one in pristine condition, has become a key target for collectors. Even in poor condition like this one, if it carries the right error or anomaly, it could still be worth a surprising amount. Let's talk errors. The 1983 P is famous for a few jaw-dropping mistakes. One of the most well-known is the spitting eagle reverse die crack, where a line appears extending from the eagle's beak. Even circulated examples of this error can sell for $100 to $500 depending on visibility. Combine that with heavy wear and you've got a coin that still commands respect. But that's not all. There are known examples of off-center strikes, broad strikes, and even double die reverses from 1983 that have turned everyday coins into massive auction sales. One 1983 P quarter struck 20% off center and still dirty from circulation, sold for over $2,400. simply because the error was bold and the coin survived. And here's where things get legendary. A small number of 1983 P quarters were struck on experimental planchets, likely during testing or transitional adjustments. These coins have unusual weights, colors, or metallurgical content. One verified example with slightly different alloy composition sold for a staggering $15,000, even in a mid-grade condition. That's right, not mint state, just well preserved enough to verify what it was. Even without errors, if you happen to find a 1983 P quarter in near mint condition, it can fetch over $1,000 raw. No joke. That's because the absence of mint sets and the poor average strike quality from Philly that year means almost no high-grade examples exist. So any survivor in excellent condition is a modern rarity. Bottom line, if you've got a 1983 P quarter that looks odd, has die cracks, off-center strikes, or even just feels heavier or lighter than normal, hold on to it. It might be one of the few remaining treasures from a time when the mint was scrambling, errors slipped through, and collectors had no official way to get new coins. This battered coin may have seen better days, but if it carries the right flaw, it could be your sleeper hit. The kind of hidden gem that turns spare change into serious cash. Next, we're moving into a coin from the 90s. And trust me, it's one that's been underestimated for far too long. Next up is a beat-up little survivor from World War II. The 1942 Jefferson Nickel with a bold P mint mark on the obverse. At first glance, you might shrug it off. The surfaces are dull, the details faded, and the coin itself looks like it's lived through decades of pocket punishment. But don't let its condition fool you. This nickel holds the weight of American history and the potential for serious collector payoff. Why? Because 1942 marked the dawn of a wartime transformation. With nickel metal desperately needed for the war effort, the U.S. Mint made a historic change. They began striking nickels from an unusual 35% silver alloy instead of the traditional composition. And for the first time ever, they used a large mint mark above Monticello, including the P for Philadelphia, which had never appeared on any U.S. coin before this moment. Now here's the twist. While most people think of the silver nickels starting in 1943, some 1942 nickels also got the silver treatment, especially those with that large P mint mark on the reverse. But the example we have here is even more intriguing, and it's got a P on the obverse, not above Monticello. That's not standard at all. In fact, a 1942 P with the mint mark on the obverse is a legitimate error, or possibly an early or misaligned strike. These are so rare, many collectors don't even know they exist. And that's what makes this coin a wild card. Coins from transitional years are notorious for minting anomalies, and 1942 was riddled with them, from wrong planchets to missing layers to double die obverses. One silver content 1942 P with a double die and Monticello sold for $18,000, despite being in only average circulated condition. Then you've got the secret weapons, the off-metal errors. A few 1942 Jefferson Nickels were mistakenly struck on foreign coin planchets or leftover blanks from earlier years. A documented example, struck on a 1943 cent bronze planchet, brought over $45,000 at auction. That coin was spotted purely because it looked off. The color, weight, and texture didn't feel right. And it doesn't stop there. A small number of proof-like strikes from Philadelphia slipped into circulation. These coins have unusually sharp details and mirror-like surfaces, and when paired with a P mint mark, even in rough shape, they've been known to fetch upwards of $30,000. But the real thunder? Rumors in the collector world suggest there are 1942 P nickels struck with partial or misaligned silver content, possibly due to rushed alloy transitions. If verified, these hybrid strikes could break the $300,000 mark, especially since they would represent one of the most dramatic composition shifts in U.S. coinage history. So this dull-looking nickel in your hand, the one with barely visible features and a strange P on the wrong side, it could be one of those hidden giants. Coins like this don't scream value. They whisper it to the sharp-eyed few who know what to look for. Before you spend it or toss it in a drawer, weigh it, examine it. Because even worn, even darkened by time, this 1942 Jefferson Nickel could be the doorway to a forgotten chapter of wartime history, and maybe even a life-changing payday. Coming up next is a coin from a post-war year that most people overlook, but this one hides something shocking just beneath the grime. Next up is this faded, almost ghost-like 1944 P. Jefferson Nickel. Worn down by decades of use but still whispering stories from America's most defining era. Its details are faint, its luster long gone, and its rim nearly flat. But this nickel isn't just another pocket piece. It's a wartime silver nickel, and it may be hiding one of the rarest surprises in U.S. coinage. During World War II, the U.S. government made a strategic decision. Nickel metal was too valuable for the war effort. So from mid-1942 through 1945, Jefferson nickels were struck using a 35% silver composition instead. That means every 1944 P nickel you find from that period contains actual silver, even if it looks beat up and dirty. And that alone gives it more than just face value. But here's where things get seriously interesting. The P mint mark above Monticello on the reverse. This marked the first time the Philadelphia Mint used a mint mark on any circulating U.S. coin. It was a bold move and a sign of changing times. That large P was meant to help workers and coin handlers identify the special silver alloy nickels in circulation. But today, it's a symbol that shouts, "Look closer." Even in worn condition, 1944 P nickels can be worth far more than 5 cents, especially if they carry mint errors, and this year was packed with them. Some coins were struck on steel cent planchets, others show dramatic off-center strikes, and a few examples even left the mint with strike-throughs or lamination issues, clear indicators that quality control was stretched thin during the war. One known 1944 P nickel with a double-die reverse, where Monticello's steps appear doubled, sold for over $9,000, even in low mint state. And get this, a heavily circulated 1944 P struck on a foreign coin planchet from the Philippines, weighing slightly less than normal, fetched more than $20,000 due to its extreme rarity. But here's a chilling twist. A small batch of proof-like 1944 P nickels was struck under high pressure with mirror-like surfaces. These were not official proofs, but early strikes that somehow got into circulation. If you find one, even in damaged or faded condition, it could sell for $5,000 to $15,000 or more, depending on collector demand. There are even whispers among numismatists of a handful of hybrid strikes, where leftover copper-nickel planchets were accidentally used in 1944, creating nickels with the wrong metal content for the year. These mystery coins haven't been widely confirmed, but just one authenticated example could push the value into six-figure territory. So don't be fooled by this coin's tired appearance. This 1944 P nickel is part of America's wartime history, a piece of silver hidden in plain sight. Whether it carries an error, a rare planchet, or a subtle die variety, it still has the power to surprise even the most seasoned collectors. Coming up next is a nickel from a turning point year, one that looks ordinary but might just be the key to a forgotten minting mystery. Next up is this rugged-looking 1943 S. Jefferson Nickel, a coin that seems like it's seen a war, and in a way, it has. With its faded surfaces, dulled edges, and almost ghostly details, you might be tempted to pass it off as pocket change. But this worn coin is anything but ordinary, because 1943 was the height of World War II, and this nickel tells a story buried in silver and sacrifice. Let's start with the basics. Like all U.S. nickels minted from mid-1942 through 1945, the 1943 S was made of a special wartime alloy, 35% silver, 56% copper, and 9% manganese. Why? Because nickel was a critical war metal used for armor plating, and the U.S. needed every bit of it. So the mint altered the composition, and in doing so, created a special subset of silver nickels that collectors cherish to this day. Now glance just above the dome of Monticello on the reverse. See that large S mint mark? That stands for the San Francisco Mint, and it was one of the rare times a mint mark ever appeared so prominently on a U.S. coin. These wartime nickels marked the first time Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco all stamped their coins in the same visible location, making it easier to track wartime issues. But here's where things get exciting. The 1943 nickel has several error varieties and hidden rarities that make it a hot target, even in bad condition. For example, there are confirmed double-die obverse DDO examples where Jefferson's eye, lips, and date appear slightly doubled, and these can fetch $1,000 to $3,000 even with circulation wear, one of the rarest mistakes. A 1943 struck on a steel cent planchet, the zinc-coated steel discs used for pennies that year. Because a cent is smaller and thinner, these error nickels look and feel completely off, and most were likely caught, but a few slipped through. One such coin sold for over $15,000, despite visible damage. Other valuable errors include off-center strikes, clipped planchets, and strike-throughs, each offering a unique glimpse into the wartime pressure on U.S. mints. Imagine production lines running day and night trying to meet demand while conserving metals. Mistakes were inevitable, and every mistake today could mean a fortune for the right collector. Even standard 1943 nickels with no known errors still fetch $2 to $5 in bad condition just because of the silver. But those with eye-catching mistakes or unusual weights? They've sold for hundreds, even in ugly, heavily circulated states. And here's a final twist. There are whispered reports of a few proof-like 1943 nickels, early strikes with a mirror shine that somehow got into circulation. Though not officially recorded, they're believed to have come from polished dies used at the start of a production run. One such coin, even with light scratches, sold for over $4,000. So this dull, grayish 1943 nickel you're seeing isn't just a relic. It's a wartime witness, a silver-laced survivor, and possibly a forgotten treasure. If you've got one lying around, get it weighed, inspect it under light, and if anything looks odd, send it in for grading. You might be holding a quiet little miracle from one of America's most critical years. And now, get ready. The next coin on our list comes from the early 50s. But its mystery lies not in what's visible, but in what's missing. Next up, feast your eyes on this heavily circulated 1942 Jefferson Nickel, a coin that looks like it's seen better days, and yet it carries one of the most important changes in U.S. coinage history. While the edges are soft, the detail worn, and the shine long gone, don't let its tired look fool you. This coin might just be a wartime sleeper with hidden value. So what makes 1942 such a fascinating year for nickels? It was a year of transition. Early in 1942, nickels were still made of their standard 75% copper and 25% nickel composition. But by mid-year, with the U.S. deep into World War II, the mint switched to a new wartime alloy, 35% silver, 56% copper, and 9% manganese. The 1942 is one of the first nickels ever struck using this silver wartime composition, making it a historic turning point. Here's how you know you've got one. Flip the coin over and look above Monticello. You'll see a large S mint mark placed proudly at the top. That oversized mark was introduced specifically for the war nickels. Easy to spot, even on a coin in rough shape like this one. And because it's made of silver, even in bad condition, this coin is worth more than face value just for its metal content. But we're not done yet. The 1942 isn't just a wartime relic. It's also known for several rare and collectible mint errors that can skyrocket its value. A notable example is the over-punched mint mark variety, where the S was punched over another mint mark or misaligned, a detail that's hard to see in circulated condition, but incredibly valuable if verified. There are also double-die obverse DDO varieties for this coin. If Jefferson's eye or the inscription "In God We Trust" appears slightly doubled under magnification, you could be looking at a coin worth hundreds or even thousands, depending on demand and condition. And here's a wild story. A 1942 S nickel with a dramatic off-center strike, over 50% off, was pulled from a junk box and later auctioned for nearly $2,000 despite obvious wear and grime. Error coins like these are often tossed aside as damaged, but for the savvy collector, they're gold mines. Even standard 1942 S silver nickels in worn condition often sell for $3 to $8 purely because of their silver content and historic value. But those with rare characteristics, odd weight, weird strike patterns, or unusual plancher color can go far beyond that, especially in today's hot collectible market. So this beat-up, overlooked 1942 S Jefferson Nickel might not catch your eye at first, but it's a wartime witness, a turning point in U.S. mint history, and maybe even an unrecognized gem. If you've got one, give it a second look. Examine the details, weigh it carefully, and if anything feels off, it could be more than just pocket change. Now stay tuned, because our next coin goes all the way back to the late 1930s. And it just might be one of the earliest wartime legends hiding in plain sight. Next up, we're spotlighting this worn but historically powerful 1943 Jefferson Nickel, a piece that may look like it's been through a war, because it literally was. Scratched, faded, and with its luster long gone, this coin might seem ordinary at first. But once you know what it represents, it becomes one of the most important coins in mid-20th century U.S. history. Let's rewind to World War II. In 1943, with nickel being a vital material for military equipment like armor plating, the U.S. Mint made a major shift. The composition of the Jefferson Nickel was temporarily changed to a 35% silver, 56% copper, and 9% manganese alloy, known today as the wartime nickel. This wasn't just a small change, it was a strategic move, and it made every 1943 nickel a literal part of the war effort. The P mint mark, prominently placed above Monticello on the reverse, tells you this coin was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, and it was the first time ever that Philadelphia used a mint mark on a U.S. coin. That alone makes the 1943 a standout in numismatic history. Even in rough condition, this silver-containing coin has intrinsic melt value, often more than $1.50 to $3 depending on silver prices. But beyond the metal, certain rare errors make the 1943 a key treasure hunt target for collectors. There are examples of double-die obverse, DDO errors, where inscriptions like Liberty or In God We Trust appear subtly doubled. Repunched mint marks are PM, where the P was stamped more than once in slightly different positions. And most exciting, coins struck on improper planchets, like copper-nickel blanks or even steel cents. These incredibly rare mistakes have sold for thousands at auction. In fact, one beat-up 1943 Jefferson Nickel with a dramatic strike-through error, where foreign material interrupted the strike, sold for over $2,000. Despite its circulated state. Another with doubled lettering fetched more than $1,100, just because of that one small flaw that makes it stand out. So if you have a 1943 Jefferson Nickel, even one that's seen better days, it's never worthless. Check the weight. It should come in around 5 grams due to the silver content. Examine the details under magnification. Look closely at the lettering and the mint mark. That beat-up old coin in your hand might just have a rare error hiding in plain sight. In the world of wartime nickels, the 1943 is both a first and a symbol. The first Philadelphia coin to proudly wear its mint mark, and a silent witness to a nation at war. Even in bad condition, it holds value, history, and the thrill of what might be. Next, we go 1 year back to a coin that started it all, the 1942 Jefferson Nickel. And there's a story there you won't want to miss. Next up in our lineup of wartime relics is this 1945 S Jefferson Nickel, a coin that might look dull, worn, and forgettable at first glance. But make no mistake, this little piece of metal played a part in America's victory during World War II. In 1945, the war was finally drawing to a close, but materials like nickel were still in short supply. Just like the 1943p we discussed earlier, this coin is part of the wartime silver series. That means it was struck using a special alloy, 35% silver, 56% copper, and 9% manganese. It weighs slightly less than modern nickels and has a unique silvery gray color. Even if it's tarnished now, that silver core is still inside. The S mint mark, found above Monticello on the reverse, tells us it was produced at the San Francisco Mint, one of 3 mints striking these special war nickels between 1942 and 1945. Interestingly, 1945 was the final year that this silver composition was used before the mint reverted to the original copper-nickel blend. Even in poor condition, the silver content alone gives the 1945 S some base value, typically $1.25 to $2.50, depending on current silver prices. But there's more to this coin than melt value. Collectors search tirelessly for error varieties, and the 1945 S has produced some remarkable ones. Repunched mintmark RPM, where the S was punched twice, slightly misaligned. Die cracks and die breaks, creating raised lines or blobs on the coin. Full steps varieties, where even weak strikes that manage to show full steps on Monticello bring premiums. And then, of course, there are the rarities. Like the off-metal errors where 1945 nickels were accidentally struck on steel cent planchets or foreign coin blanks. These extreme errors can sell for thousands, even when heavily circulated. One particularly faded 1945 S nickel with a dramatic strike-through grease error sold for over $900, simply because the design was partially missing due to mint machinery error. Another, featuring an off-center strike, reached $1,200 at auction, again, in well-worn condition. But the most important thing about this coin isn't just the errors or the silver. It's what it represents. The 1945 S marks the end of the wartime nickel era. It's the final chapter in a 4-year experiment where America's coins were literally adapted to meet the needs of a world at war. So this beat-up 1945 S Jefferson Nickel in your hand, it may not shine, it may be scratched, but it matters. It tells a story of sacrifice, adaptation, and ingenuity, and of a country minting silver nickels so it could save nickel for tanks and artillery. Hold on to it, because while it might not win beauty contests, it stands as one of the most historically meaningful nickels ever produced. Coming up next, we take a closer look at the end of World War II minting and how 1946 brought coins back to peacetime metals and what that means for collectors today.